So thank you everybody for coming. Pleasure to be here with this great panelist. So today the main topic is to talk about AppSec, of course. Let's focus on the agility that the developers have and basically how it affects our application security programs, our approach, and our challenges. Let's start with a quick intro to get to know each other. Can you start? I'm kidding. My name is Roy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Enzo Security. Before Enzo, I was the head of application security at Wix.com. Just to give you some sizes, back then I managed a group of 12 AppSec engineers that provided services for more than 1,200 developers on the R&D side, so big enough organization.
Awesome. All right, can you guys hear me? Sweet. Seth Kirschner here, based just outside of New York City. I lead application security for DoubleVerify, which is a publicly traded ad tech company on the New York Stock Exchange. It's really great to be here. I'm really excited to talk with you guys today. And a little bit about my background. I have about 300 engineers globally that work on my team. Every language above the sun, and it's a lot to deal with. They move at 100 million miles an hour with a lot of technology. And so I have to play as a one-man army, Swiss Army knife to keep up with them.
That's interesting. Hi everyone, I'm Vandana. I'm based in India, Bangalore. Currently, I'm part of Sneak. I'm taking care of India operations. And I'm also chairing OWASP globally.
Cool. So, my name is Emil. I'm from Norway, Oslo. I work for a Norwegian company, of course, that has a website. It's basically the Craigslist of Norway, but a lot nicer, of course. And we have about 200 engineers that are working on developing our products, and the security team is basically 2 people. So the ratio is like 200 to 2, so yeah. It's probably familiar for a lot of people here.
Great. So basically, let's start with the basics. We all have been in this industry for a while. We've seen the worst of the worst, the best of the best. But let's start with the negative. What's the main challenges as you see today as AppSec leaders in your organizations?
Yeah, so I have 2. One, getting enough budget to afford anything. Every single cybersecurity tool is a lot of love, and that means money. And it's very expensive. So you have to be able to pitch to your executive team on demand all the time why you need money and show them the risk, actually show it to them. And then I think the second one is hiring. Like trying to find good talent is so difficult, especially if you want some DevSecOps engineers. There's 10 in the whole world, I'm pretty sure. So it's really hard to find them.
Yeah, I agree. And when you talk about skilling and when you talk about hiring, there's another thing that we can do is cross-skilling. Because we can do brown bag sessions, we can do training sessions within the organizations. A lot of organizations don't have the right budget. And I totally agree that if we don't have the budget, nothing can happen. So we need to have some budget. And another thing that I've realized lately that when we talk about budget for security, at the same time, we need to have security budget for developers as well. Because till the time we don't train them, nothing is going to happen or we can't move the mountains.
So yeah, the biggest pain point that I have in my organization is basically when we acquire a new tool, it could be something we buy or an open source tool, and we try to roll it out. It's very hard to roll it out for 30 different teams. You have to have a workshop with every team. It takes a lot of time. And then also when you start using tools, there is often a lot of false positives. So the developers, they get basically pissed off because you're blocking them. So we want to do everything we can to not block them while still being secure. So it's a very hard balance.
Yeah.
Great. So we talked about budget, of course, because who cares about money? And we talked about the engagement with the developers and how we actually show them the good and the real value. But let's dig into the details a bit. So basically, let's start with what is an AppSec. How do you define application security to the organization, to the executive team? Because we need budget, we need resources, we need good people, we need to create those relationships with the organization. What is an application security and what's your pitch elevator for that?
So my way is always scary way. Till the time you don't tell me what can go wrong, nobody would understand. Because we've tried doing the right way, the polite way, but it never works out. So you have to make sure that there's a way where they understand that yes, things can go wrong. Because when a breach happens, it just doesn't affect one team. It affects the whole organization, and it's never about just money. It's about reputation. think about, I generally take this example, but then apologies if you are anyone of you is from Equifax. Because when Equifax breach happened, it became talk of the town. They didn't know how many users got affected, what was going behind that. That was a very, very big breach. Now, think of your organization. If you say, oh, no, nothing is going to happen to me. It is like not my child syndrome. Oh, it happened to them, but no, we are good. Trust me, no one is 100% secure. When your application is online, it needs security. And in very simple terms, that's application security. Understand that your application is already breached. What you can do to make sure your data is not getting leaked. So for that, you have to take measures. You have to train developers, you have to train people, you have to have the right security team. And it's not just about the right tool set. It's not just about the right technology or process. Right people at the same time. And they working together and having the right culture. And that's what actually makes AppSec.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I define application security or security engineering as any tool or process that you can sprinkle on and add in the development life cycle. So basically you can do the threat modeling, the code scanning, or stuff like that. And that's basically all the AppSec activities. And how I sell it to the management is basically, if we don't do these things, then we will have all these other vulnerabilities, right? And then in order to show them that, you have to do vulnerability management of the real findings you have from bug bounty or from pen test or from code scanning tools or any tool, and then show them, okay, how long has this been into production? Has it been 1 month or a year? And then you can say, oh, we have been exposed for a very long time. And the risk of that can be that we are the next Equifax or anything like that. And then it's easier to sell it and get budget for tooling, I think. Seth?
Yeah, so it's certainly unique. I think for me, I have a really unique approach to application security. It's a good question to ask yourself a few things, right? So one, did you build it or did you buy it? Or did someone else build it or buy it? Two, how are you using it? Is it internal or is it external? Three, what is the sensitivity of the data? Four, how much revenue does it generate for your company? And then five, you have to look at it from the perspective of how do you prioritize it all. So what does that mean from an AppSec point of view? Anything from containers. Anything, if you're big in using containers, that's now your problem. Infrastructure as code, which is now being used. Anything with your CI/CD, your pipelines, you need to understand that. The data that's underlying and actually within the application. Not only that, but then you have to think about it from an offensive testing. How are you actually testing these? How often are you testing these? Do you have APIs? Are those APIs externally facing? If they are externally facing, are you testing those APIs to make sure that they can be built properly? Then product security, which is now included as well as applications now. So teaching all your product leaders in your company that you have to dedicate time, get the buy-in. And then that's really like the bare minimum. And so the reality is that when you have things like auto DevOps now and you're deploying code 100 million miles an hour across a scale, any single point in time, you have to be sure that you're integrating your tests as much as possible without pissing off your developers. And that's the first thing and the easiest thing to do is piss off your developers. So one of the best things possible is to train them, empower them as much as you can. So then that's another part of AppSec. As you can see, this gets bigger and bigger. So you have to train them all now and you need budget to do all of these things. And then you have cloud. And cloud is a whole problem of itself. But if you're deploying your applications in cloud using a publicly traded cloud service provider, you have a lot more to deal with, and this is all now part of your applications and application security. So going to management is like, okay, anything that's not incident response, anything that's not your traditional SOC, anything that's not your traditional threat and vulnerability management for your on-prem assets, anything that's not governance, risk, and compliance, although some of that is still application security now, and that becomes application security. So it's a really tough sell, and I think the good thing now with the increased usage of DevSecOps globally and making that term more well understood, you can train your executives and say, hey, what does that actually mean to your organization? You put up a slide and you go, everything. And then I think it starts to make them aware, like, okay, there's a lot of risk involved with this, and it can cost our business millions or billions of dollars.
Great. Actually, Seth, I really agree with you that application security as an industry, it evolves over time. We started with a single line of code, then we had the pipeline, then a single API, and now like basically everything is software. So how do you see the application security in the overall cybersecurity industry? Like where do you put it? We have the network security, the cloud security, the infra, we have the AppSec. How do you put it in the entire picture? And how do you get the priority that, or where do you put the priority for the application security compared to the other domains?
So when we talk about categorizing application security in front of any other security practices, we cannot say that application security is important or network security is important. But what we can say is that the fun fact starts is that application is the front view for your organization. And if that's breached, what will you do for the rest? Because that people can pivot inside, and that's what we have done it when we were pen testing or when we were red teaming or whatever we were trying to do with the application. So we need to understand that all of these things are connected because we are hosting most of our applications on cloud now. Especially in the past 3 years, what we have seen is that the organizations which were not planning to move to cloud, they have moved to cloud. So it becomes even more important that we club them together and understand where things can go wrong. You have everything right for the application, but if you've not done the right cloud configuration, what will you do? And as per a lot of research, especially if I talk about Ponemon Institute research, they specifically says that misconfiguration is one of the biggest challenge in cloud or even in general. So we should start looking at that. And on top of it, application security has grown big. People call it DevSecOps, people call it this, that, all of this is interconnected. Whether I say it, they are different, whether I say it, they are not, but they are all interconnected. You need to scan the code. You need to scan the libraries, software composition analysis. Then comes application testing. Then comes load testing, chaos engineering, observability, and whatnot. All of this is like, if I miss one piece, I don't know where things would land. So you have to plan, and it is not like, oh, I have done all of this and I'm secure. It's a journey. It's a continuous journey because there are applications which have changed over the time. And on top of it, let me go back to OWASP Top 10. That's my favorite topic, so I'm just going to pitch in. OWASP Top 10 has slight changes every 3 to 4 years. But injection used to be on top. Suddenly, after so in September 2021, it came down to number 3. And everyone was like, oh, okay, it's going down. And what we saw in December, Log4j. Now, these remote code executions have started to come again. So what are we going to say, that injection should come on top? But what I would say is that these things, when we were kids, they were there. We've grown up, they're there. And our kids are going to grow up, they're going to see. So what we need to do is basic hygiene practices that we need to look at, because I think we are missing on small basic hygiene practices. We start saying, oh, this person or this organization is using this technology, or this technology is fancy, everyone is buzzing about it, let's start using it. But we don't understand the nitty-gritties behind it. We don't understand the security behind it. But when we are adopting something new, we start understanding what it is all about. Trust me, half the job is done. Half the job is done. And then you can start looking towards making other things in practice. And other things what can actually fit into places. It is like jigsaw puzzle where different pieces are there. And even if you miss one piece, it is gone. Whatever we say. So let's make something new for the kids. Let's have some new vulnerabilities for the kids where they say, oh, this is not somewhere where I was like, okay, I've seen it, been there, done that. So that's my take on that.
So yeah, the question was about how you see application security relating to CloudSec and all the other stuff, yeah. So I think that, like my team, we also own the CloudSec, because when you run and deploy your application, you basically have to write some infrastructure as code, and that's also code, and that's also part of the application.
Emil, try to speak louder because we need to
be okay.
louder
I will
than the
try
other
to speak
side.
louder. Yo. So yeah, basically I think that cloud security and AppSec is basically interconnected, because like we all do the same thing. We deploy our applications to the cloud, we write the infrastructure as code, and all that stuff. So yeah, I think it's pretty similar, and it's, yeah, we have the same budget for those things. But for example, we don't own the corporate security. That's like some other team, right? But they're also friends of us, so we are trying to basically secure the cooperation together. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Emil and I have a lot of commonality at our companies where you don't have a say in almost everything. And so what I mean by that is like whenever a major business decision's made or you're going to spend north of $200,000, let's say, on some decision at the company, they're going to bring in application security into that conversation. What is application security? I mean, I talked about it a little bit before, but the things I don't touch, let's start there, and then everything else falls in application security. So what you don't touch is like general governance, risk, and compliance. If you're doing audit, if you're dealing with regulatory, you're doing like security questionnaires, like normally for the most part, application security probably won't be involved in there. Let's say you're going to be doing traditional corporate IT. I also have partners that deal with corporate IT. I work with them very closely. We have to. They're part of the same team ultimately, right? And at the end of the day, like other than incident response or forensic or your SOC, everything else is application security now, because the way that you're building and deploying apps, the way that your company functions, the way that your company makes revenue, or what you're trying to do at the end of the day, like you have to determine some risk-based approach to your company and be able to deliver that to your executives. And anything that's risk related to your applications, like I said, internal, external, did you build it? Did you buy it? Did someone else build it or buy it? Are you reusing code? Do you know if that code's safe? How are you validating if that's safe? And at the scale, when you have just hundreds of developers running 1 million miles an hour, from our point of view as an application security, you try to get ahead and try to understand where do things deviate from the norm, right? And so included in that, also now, monitoring. You have to be able to monitor, are your applications functioning properly? And then if they deviate away, does security need to be involved? So if you have an incident that's a performance incident, then at what point do you say, okay, we've now triggered this certain event and security or application security needs to come in? And so in general, I think you have cloud, you have apps, you have data, you have product, and the list goes on and on and on. And the reality is, I think more and more as the industry continues to evolve, you're going to see application security becoming a #1 critical thing for every single executives. Thankful for Log4j, Spring4Shell, whatever you want to call it. We're going to have more of these coming in the very near future. The good news is that it brought a lot of light towards executives, a lot of light in the Wall Street Journal. People that had no idea what this was now recognize it, but that also means that your board's going to start asking a lot more questions. So if you are at a publicly traded company, the board is going to start asking a lot more about application security, which is hopefully good. You're able to get more budget. You're able to afford the prettier tools and nicer tools, and hopefully be able to report on it in a way that's valuable for your executives.
Great. So maybe one last question before we open the discussion, because I really like to hear your side on this and your take on this, and how do you see AppSec from your perspective. But let's assume that we have no budget limitation, no open questions, no prioritization. We have everything that we want. So can you define or describe the dream application security program as you see it? How do you define like the best case scenario? And maybe also add your one best team on the other side.
Yeah, so basically if you have unlimited budget, you should probably get more security engineers. So instead of having 2 persons per 200 developers, you should have 10 or 20. Then you can do a lot more stuff. Then you can start automating, using all the data, connecting it, and just helping developers in a much more better way. And that's probably the biggest thing, to have more security engineering resources. And then because also every time you buy a tool, like all the vendors, they say that, okay, it will work perfectly, but the reality is that you have to use them actively and automate them, and like they have so many bugs, right? So you have to fix them, and yeah, it's a lot of work deploying new tools, I think. And what was the last one?
Yeah, what's your tip on this? Like one tip, one best tip for you, like when you start an application security program, it can be starting from scratch, it can be very mature organization. What's the one best tip that you can give?
So basically try to figure out how many vulnerabilities you have. So do a lot of testing, maybe start a bug bounty, do a lot of code scanning, and try to figure out, do you have vulnerabilities, or like what level are you on? Like are the developers following any tools or processes, and then take it from there. Because if you don't have a lot, then you don't have to focus a lot on it, right? But usually most people have a lot of vulnerabilities. So focus on the exposure time of the vulnerabilities and try to push that to management.
But do you think that we should start from bringing in more tools that will allow us to see more and more vulnerabilities, or maybe we should hire the first security architect, security pen tester, maybe bug bounty? Like there are many different directions. So where, from your point of view, where we get the most value from?
Yes, I think you need to hire.
And pay attention that probably there are many bug bounty hunters in this crowd, so give them the respect.
So I'm thinking that you need to hire the first resources that can work full-time on security, because if you don't have people working full-time on security, then it's very hard to get stuff done, right? So focus on the staffing, I think.
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, one of the things is automate everything to the best of your ability. It's the only way to stay alive. Like ratios 200 to 2, 300 to 1. How do you do it, right? You're always trying to stay alive to the best of your ability. You need to automate as much as possible, but don't forget about manual testing because it's so important. Even if you automate everything, that doesn't mean that you're secure. And don't let that, be comparable to your executive team, to your boards. I think one of the scariest things in AppSec that I'd love to make easier and easier is if you're at a company that's acquiring and you're doing M&A and you're prevalent in the space, it is the scariest thing for an application security professional because what happens is more frequently now they're doing a lot of pre-transactional due diligence on these companies from an application security point of view, but a lot of times they're not. And that's where things go really bad because you just acquire all this technical debt and you don't even know where to start. You now have a new source code manager that has no controls built in. You now have a new CI/CD that you have no idea where it's working, how it's working, and so you have to spend a lot of time in application doing due diligence. I agree, unlimited budget, hire away. You need more and more staff, but even finding really good trained professionals is one of the biggest struggles in this entire industry because the barriers to entry are so high. And that what's happening is that the reliance on certifications and other things is creating barriers to jobs, and it's not allowing professionals to enter the space that might have not come from a security background just like myself, right? And the interesting part is, too, I built DV's AppSec program from literally a blank sheet of paper. And one of the hardest challenges is just doing it as fast as possible, right? So having more engineers doesn't necessarily fix your speed. And so the way to build speed is to get really good advisors, really good mentors. If you have heard of IANS or research faculty, or there's a couple other companies that do this, speak with trusted professionals that have built AppSec programs in the past, build a strategy. The strategy is going to be at least 36 months. There's no way you're going to build a successful AppSec program in any time shorter than that. Even if you have 10 engineers, there's just not a chance. So speak with executives that have done it. Emulate the type of strategy first. Number one, visibility. So if you don't have visibility, you know nothing. That's it. So you have to start with visibility into your pipelines, visibility into your cloud, visibility into your source code managers, visibility into pretty much everything at your company. Speak to every single engineer because I can almost guarantee that they're going to hide information from you, right? And so every engineer is going to have a different point of view. Set up interviews. Like if you're building an AppSec program from scratch, you should have at least an interview with every single engineer at your company. And I will tell you it will be the most beneficial thing to you as an AppSec engineer because you're not going to know what to build, how to build it, where to get money to build it, so on and so forth. It's unfortunate that this industry really struggles from potentially budget, especially when you're competing against CISOs, other CISO priorities. But the reality is you have to step up to the gate and show them what it's really about. It's like I said, good news about Log4j, we're bringing a lot of tension, but at the end of the day, even if you're given unlimited budget, you have to be able to balance like where to prioritize your tasks, build out your roadmap, execute against your roadmap, stick to it, don't let deviations come in the way. And at the end of the day, like bug bounty, for example, is one of the most important tools that you can pitch to your executives. It really does work magic, but it can be a lot of money. So you have to show them in dollars, what does that risk reduction look like? And being able to quantify risk is one of the hardest things in the world. No one can do it well, but the reality is without it, you're never going to get buy-in, especially from a publicly traded company for that amount of money. So you have to show them the risk, show them what can happen. Bug bounty is a great way to do that.
So I would say start there. If you have everything right and you have set up on autopilot mode, the first thing to start is having right security champions. Because we can't say that everything is going to be right always. So have security champions. You have enough time for that. You can train them. At the same time, look at automation. I'm a huge fan of automation. Automating anything and everything that's humanly possible, that's what we can do. Especially when something can go wrong, you don't even know about it. So automation helps you overcome that. Let's start there. Now, people are getting educated around security. There's an automation which is in place. There are things that you're testing manually because that's not possible to test or with automation. So now, what next can be done is getting your basics right, wherein you start checking out what you currently have. Now, when these breaches happen, let's take the very, very recent example of Log4j. How many organizations knew that they are using Log4j? Not many. It was talk of the town. I was on vacation, but still I could see my Twitter to LinkedIn to everything getting flooded. There were a lot of discussions happening around. So many organizations lost huge amount of money just by figuring out where are we with Log4j. Is that new? I don't think so. The same thing happened with Equifax as well. Same thing happened with SolarWinds. SolarWinds, though, they were actually scanning things, but they couldn't detect it. Microsoft and there's another company actually detected it and told them about it, which became huge, huge problem. So now, when you have everything right, or you feel you have tools, process, people, technology, everything, let's start understanding people, their education, automation, getting your S-bombs ready. S-bomb is something which is sometimes underused word or overused word, but I would say it's underused because not many people talk about that you need to have repository of things what you have. Because for me, if I'll say that I know everything, I don't know everything. What my website use, sometimes I don't even know. So right documentation for the web applications or software code is very important. There were times when the team was using certain repository for the code base, which was used for security testing, but what went live was different. They said it was replica and we did it. How could you say that? You don't even know about it. And what happens? It's a very normal process. If I am working on certain application, I will download something from the internet if it's not working and will start using. And if I leave the organization or switch the team, will I know everything? No. So let's start with documenting everything. Now, there's another thing for leadership. Because we can't say that everything we have to do or developers have to do, security team has to do. It cascades down from the leadership, where they have to have right clarity, right support. Because even if there's something that goes wrong, it is fine. But how soon you can correct it, let's talk about that. Because if I start blaming, shaming, oh, you did this, how it happened, nothing is going to work out. Even if something goes wrong, people will be shy in telling you, will be scared in telling you that these are the things that can go wrong. So best is we start communicating. And even from the budget perspective, let's tell that, okay, this is how much budget I can give or how much I can fetch for you. Let's start planning which tools we can buy. A lot of times we buy the tool, but they're not useful. At least for my CISO friends, I can say that I can vouch for it. They've told me that the tool was not useful. They've just bought it. So let's start evaluating open source tools in certain constrained environment and understand what we really need and then go for commercial tool. I speak from an open source perspective. I'm a huge fan of commercial tools as well. But what you need is important. All the tools are good. There's no tool which is bad. But how you use it, that's important. If something happens to an organization, we can't blame the vendor. Vendor is trying to protect, and that's why these tools are coming out. So first, let's understand our own appetite and then start using it. That's my 2 cents on it.
One thing to add. Like another thing to add here is if you have engineer and you have engineering time, build out as many preventative controls ahead of time as you possibly can while you're building out your program, while you're scaling it, while you're training your champions, while you're finding champions, while you're building out programs, processes, anything, and document all of your preventative controls that you have in a way that you can show executives like, look, for example, if you're using GCP, and you have Firebase, like you should shut that service down as fast as possible. Like there's so many limited controls from a security perspective that you can have, for example, in Firebase. It's an absolute nightmare for an application security professional because none of the tools that even exist on the market scan Firebase. It's like the craziest thing ever. And so if the tools can't even scan it, then what are you going to be doing? Like, you're going to be chasing your tail. And so preventative controls are so important. If you are able to, for example, using Control Tower in AWS, build out like SCPs, service control policies, like across your organization, shut down as much as you can ahead of time. Do not let your developers do whatever they want, because that's what they naturally do. They will find every way to circumvent security controls possible, because they're trying to move as fast as they want, whenever they want, with whatever technology they need. And so you have to be able to shut them down before they can grow. And if you're playing catch up and you're already trying to chase their tail, you have to go to your executives, go to your leadership team, go to your C-suite, and start documenting every single risk that's wrong with the products. Let them make a business case. If they want to accept the risk, that's their fault. At least as an application security professional, you're doing your job.
Yeah, actually my take on this, again, based on my previous experience, I think that it all starts and continues with the communication. To create this common language between the security team, the engineering, and the management. At the end of the day, we all want to sleep well at night, okay? Unless we are on the other side and we want to find some bugs, so it's also good. But at the end of the day, we all want that the organization will be secured and that the entire platform will be okay. The thing is that today, the management, they care about the budget and the bottom line. Keep me quiet. If nothing is interesting, don't speak with me. We have the security team that wants to bring more and more solutions, more eyes, more tools, more automations, more attention from the developers. And we have the developers that all they care about is leave your shit on your side, let me run fast. I'm measured by my velocity. This is why I get my paycheck. Let me run. So now you need to actually communicate between those three different groups and how you create this common language that no matter if you are running a tool, if you are a pen tester, if you are a security architect that run threat model session, you need to come ready to the R&D groups to speak the same language, to know exactly about the technology, to come ready with all the technical information that they need in order to create this trust and, again, the basic communication level that will allow us to actually do the security together. We see many organizations that today, we implement a lot of tools, they generate a lot of noise. I'm not talking about the coverage of those tools, but even if it covers only 10% of your production, it will generate enough noise that all of us will get work for the rest of our life. So you just, most of the time, automate this noise to the developers. So you actually get the opposite effect from the security perspective. Instead of educate them, bring them in, teach them, let them know what we need to do and how to engage them, you just shift the noise to their side. So this is why my 2 cents on this is it's all about the communication. So I think that now it's good time to open the discussion. So maybe let's start with the panelists. If you have some more questions that you would like to raise and ask your friends, and if no, let's open it to the audience.
So what are the key metrics that you track to measure the effectiveness of your AppSec program or your tools and stuff like that?
Yep. So first metric, especially in the AppSec world, I took this from traditional, my background, spent a lot of time in threat and vulnerability management with your traditional vulnerability scanners, Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable, whatever. And so the best metric for your entirety of your AppSec program is burn down rate, 100%. And so what that means is the number of vulnerabilities being remediated or fixed over a given period of time compared to the number of new vulnerabilities being introduced in that exact same time. And you want to show this as a ratio. This is the one key metric that you can say, okay, my developers are actually fixing. Because if your burn down rate is 0, for example, that means there's so many vulnerabilities being introduced and nothing's being fixed. And that's a huge problem, because what's going to happen is no matter how many tools you have, if your developers aren't sitting there and fixing their code, at least exploring them, opening up, for example, if you're using ServiceNow or Jira, whatever your ticketing system is, you need proof that their developers are actually fixing something. And if they're not opening up, pull requests, merge requests that are addressing security vulnerabilities, and you don't see that number of vulnerabilities going down, that means your program is completely stagnant. And so all this work that you've done is entirely useless. And what you can do with that metric is a really cool thing. You can bring it to your CTO, your CIO, et cetera, in your organization. You can show them like, okay, your developers are actually working. If they're not working, then you have to pressure then your C-suite executives to get them kickstarted, to get sprint time, for example, dedicated towards security. It shows a lot about the success of a program. There are several other metrics, but that's burn down rate is absolutely the first one. You can use it for infrastructure as code. You can use it for containers, like addressing container issues as well. You can use it in traditional threat and vulnerability management. There's a lot of different areas of cyber where burn down rate is one of the best metrics to track for the success of your program.
Yeah, and especially when you're building an AppSec program, you need to understand what you're really looking for in that AppSec program. How many applications are you trying to cover? Especially when I was working for one organization a little while ago, where I understand that they don't have any place where they can update the applications that they're using. They say, okay, I have these many different teams who are working on different applications, and that's it. So till the time you don't have the recognition or categorization of your application, oh, that's your crown jewel. That needs a lot of attention. How frequently should we scan it? How frequently should we figure out the bugs in that? Or when we talk about the whole DevSecOps program, how exactly the application testing would happen. Especially for crown jewel, as far as I know, you can't just keep scanning it. It has to be kept very, very safely. And you have to understand it should not go down if it's your prime application. So it's important that first we do our homework, wherein how many applications we have, what kind of techniques they use. Every application is different. No two applications are same. Like we say, no two organizations are same. Or no two organizations can have the same DevSecOps practices. I can adopt what you have, but I might not be able to replicate the same thing because I might be using different languages, I might be using different practices, I'll have different skill set for people. So I need to write it down. I need to have a proper set of brainstorming done. There's something called design thinking, what people say. So if you're starting fresh, let's start with those brainstorming ideas. Write down everything. Those agile practices when we say, and especially this panel is all about agility and software security, so let's start practicing those agile methodologies. Let's have those whiteboards, those stickers, those Trello boards. Understand where can we go wrong. Think about everything. For me, what I do is, I do the same thing in my own life as well. I write down all of these things and practice it. And you can only do it when you practice it. If you preach and don't practice, nothing is going to work out. You forget it.
Cool, very good answers.
Great. Actually, I want to add to this. If we talk about measurement and how we actually add metrics when we talk about the application security as a program, I think that it's all about comparison between different things and maybe add also gamification to bring more people in. So if you think about it, think about a graph that compare between my different application security sources. We have Snyk, we have Checkmarx, Veracode, Bug Bounty, different resources. Let's compare between them. So it's not just the amount of open bugs, because it's easy to win in this counter. Maybe the amount of tickets that were triaged, the amount of false positives and things like that, to measure the value of each one of our resources. Think about the same approach to measure our human factor. Pen testers, bug bounty hunters, security architects, how many assets they cover, how many bugs they found, how many tickets they triage, like give them some score about their work and create internal competition, healthy competition, of course. And the same works with the business units and the different teams in the R&D. Show them in your face, exactly as Seth mentioned before, in your face. Those are the number of bugs, the number of false positives, the number of activities that you performed in the last 2 weeks for the security, and don't forget the line in the budget. If you have bug bounty program, you have very qualified source of truth that can bring you a lot of the bottom line of what you actually pay for your application security findings. If you put it on the same slide with all the different business units, trust me that your management will get your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the point that you mentioned, gamification. That's something I think we all needed. If you tell me, oh, you have to do this checklist, I'll forget it. I'll be very honest about it. Whatever my age would be, how much experience I have, I will forget it. So if you tell, okay, this is what can go wrong. If you say that if I cross the road and there'll be car which will pass by, hit me and I'll die, okay, what will happen? I'll see, okay, I'll just say. If there's a near and dear one which will get affected, I'll be more worried about it. So what I'll do is, I'll use it in a way where people understand where things can go wrong. Because it's not just affecting them, but the things around them. I think that's important, and gamification actually really helps in that because it gets to your head, and that's what makes you do more of security.
Great. Any more questions that you wanted to raise? You're good?
Good.
What about you? Yes. Let's start with you. I don't think that we have another mic. Let's try.
Pass the mic. Other people would not be able to hear you.
What I was wondering is, if you guys could change the narrative for application security to where we're basically sensors. We provide the information and convert it back over to the product owners or project management and explain to them that these are how many bugs that are on yours. So in essence, we want to put security as a facet of their product, just like performance, schedule, and everything else. So therefore, their incentives are based upon how many bugs or whatever else, or whatever the sensors we're providing the information back to them. So they, for their pay, they get paid based upon how good their product is. We tell them how secure their product is. Have you guys been able to change the narrative? Because what I see is a lot of developers go, we're being told what to do. We don't have any say-so over what we do. We just, we're agile product, so we go through and say, here's your user stories, the features, whatever else you got to do. And security just doesn't get prioritized for that because the product owner, the people who want the performance stuff or the features are basically saying, this is more important. But if we can change the narrative to say, this is important, your pay is going to get cut because you have all these vulnerabilities and issues against it. So I'm just trying to find out, are you guys even going to that place? Because I don't want to own security. I'm AppSec. I want to just be hey, here's what it is. I want to be able to understand and explain to them, here's your risk, and then let the executives go through and say, hey, why are you red? Why is AppSec telling you you're screwed? Sorry, you're getting fired or your pay's cut in half or whatever else. So have you guys been able to change the narrative?
So excellent question. I think first and foremost, that is one of the biggest challenges any organization has up front. And so when you're first building out an application security program, start having monthly check-ins with all your senior engineering leadership, all your teams. Let's say you have 30 teams, you need to meet with all 30 leaders. Don't let it slip by. Set them up in small groups based upon their competency, maybe their tech stack, depending on how your organization's aligned. And then over time, what you need to do, and what I've started doing over the past probably 8-9 months now, is inviting product to all those conversations. So slowly but surely do the product leaders now join the conversation. And the thing is, change is not going to happen overnight. Do not expect it to happen immediately. And so I think one of the ways that we've been changing that narrative at our company is keep pressuring and keep telling everyone that dedicated sprint time needs to be needs to be given to security measures, whether they're the product lead. So if you're doing PRDs, FRDs, functional design documents throughout your company, if security is not a line item on that, that's one of your easy wins. Because as soon as you get it on there, everyone's going to start thinking about it, starting from the leadership down to the engineers. If your product team, for example, at my company, is the one defining priorities of what's going to be built and how it's going to be built, rather than chasing the tail about, hey, these applications were built for the last 10 years, start focusing on what are the applications for tomorrow, version 2 of your product or your application, and then begin those conversations because it's going to be much easier to start with those than go back in time and try to fix everything that's been done. As soon as you click on any vulnerability scanner in the AppSec and threat and vulnerability, whatever it is, you're going to have a huge backlog. And getting through that backlog is going to be really difficult, and you're not going to want to go to management and saying, hey, all my engineers at the company stop working. We need to go fix security problems. It's never going to happen, and they're going to hate you for it. So as mentioned before, start with your crown jewels. Those are really good places to start. Start with those product leaders that are working on the crown jewels. If they do not have security as part of their regular day-to-day job, start embedding it. Another really good life hack in this particular space is doing product security checklists that you can give to all your product leads across your company and say, please review this checklist. If you're storing, for example, a password, make sure that the password is not in plain text and that it's encrypted. And like, if they're not building the product to have encryption, then they're gonna have to go back in time. It's gonna be a huge cost, a huge pain to the company. And so if you start to explain to them and start getting them into the conversations, training your product teams on what security is, bringing in researchers in the space that are well adopted, that do product security at very large companies, have them come do a session at your company. Like, get 30 minutes and say, hey, can you present to my product leadership about why product security is so important?
So have you been able to get security into their HR side as a component?
So not for pay, and the reason being is because you're gonna incentivize them the wrong way, and people are gonna start hating you. And it's very, very easy in AppSec from day zero. Like, when you come in, you start changing the way that pipelines are done, the way that you're securing your application. Everyone's going to hate you from day zero. But if you start docking their pay, they're going to hate you a lot more. So that's, in my perspective, that's not really a great incentive factor, because they're going to get really mad very fast. And so I haven't had success with that. I wasn't able to ever do that in previous companies or in companies I consulted with, and I don't think that should be an approach moving forward either. I really don't think it's going to be happy. It's a good question, but I think the industry as a whole has a little bit longer to go from that perspective. Do you guys want to add anything?
Yeah. I would love to add something to it. My approach would be totally different to it, because when I was managing my team, I had a lot of challenges, especially with product managers and the people around it. Because when you talk about products, it's not just one person. It's the whole team, it's architects, it's whatnot. And even when you show up in scrums, not everyone would want to have security representation, because they will treat you as an enemy. At least that's what happened with me. It took me good 6 months to build that reputation. They will never trust you fully till the time you show them that you trust them. So it all starts there. Another thing is that if I say that something with project managers or product managers or teams, when we are talking about all of this, I like scaring people. But then at the same time, I try and build a relationship with them. I would say, okay, let's start understanding where, if a breach happens or if there's a vulnerability that bugs comes in, you'll have to go back and fix. Do you have time for it? And how much time you have for it? Let's talk to the leadership, because we need to have time. You don't have time, I don't have time, we will have clashes and nothing will work out. Because we will have the same goal, that we want organizations to have security. So what we can do is start rewarding people who are being proactive in fixing the bugs. We have done a lot of bug bounty hunting within the organizations, between multiple teams, not to name shame anyone, not to name shame or say that, oh, they found bugs, but to reward people. And it turned out to be the most amazing thing. Let me be very candid about that. Because they were very, very enthusiastic in finding those bugs. And then, before anyone finds those bugs, we within the teams, developers within the teams are finding the bugs and fixing it. And the best part is they're getting rewarded for that. How beautiful can be that? And then product managers are happy about it.
Got a lot of questions.
Oh.
Maybe move on. Yeah. Ask away.
Thank you guys for sharing. I'm Lars. I'm from Norway, as Emil. So go Norway. So I want to derail it a little bit. I get the impression that we do all this AppSec stuff because developers are sloppy and rogue villains. In the long run, I can't see why we shouldn't assume that developers want to write secure and kind of good code. It should be in their DNA. Maybe that's not how it is now. Maybe it's a cultural thing. But what can we do to make that happen?
Yeah, I think that actually it relates to the previous question. I'm not a really believer in resource allocation. Like, don't say 1 day per week for security or one specific developer for security. It's more about to create this engagement. And I really like to compare the application security to the code quality industry, for example. If today you have bug in your code, the blame is on the developer. There is no open question about that. There are no developers that want to create bugs in their code from code quality issues. We need to get to the same level when we talk about application security. Once we will get to this level, that the developers will actually own their own code. They will be the owner of the code, of the velocity, of the performance, of the quality, and also the security. The security is part of this great party. Once it's done and it's aligned, we will have critical bug, we will have high bugs, we will have low bugs, different kind of bugs, and no matter what's the source of each one of those bugs, once we have an alignment and we understand that the developers is the owner of it, we will get the relevant resources in order to mitigate those bugs. And then we need, of course, the management commitment and the engagement from the management side that will agree with us on the SLA, on the time that we need to approach it, how fast we need to handle those defects and bugs. But it's all about the ownership. If the blame will be on the developer, because the blame is on the developer, if the blame will be on the developer, they will take the responsibility and they will be on the wall of the wall of shame, of the wall of like that. That's how it works at the end of the day.
Yeah, I guess just one extra point. Gamify. We talked about it before. Gamification is so important. There's a lot of vendors out there. If you have the budget and you're able to do it, make it fun for your developers. If it's not fun, they're going to hate you. And at the end of the day, some developers naturally are going to love security, and they're going to try their best to better themselves as a developer. But there's going to be a handful of them that absolutely hate security. They're going to no idea what you're talking about. This is a false positive, blah, blah, blah. Show them that they're wrong, right? Show them. And then that's the way for them to change their mind. If you come in with a very technical skill set and you actually perform an injection attack on their code or on their web app or on their API or whatever it might be, they're going to start listening to you after that, because they're going to gain your trust as an application security professional, that you know what you're talking about and you're just not making things up.
Okay. All right, just a short thing that same as Roy said, that all software vulnerabilities are basically bugs, and all teams should own their bugs, their uptime and everything. So, I think security vulnerabilities is the same as any other bug, and the teams owns it themselves to fix it. And in order to get them to fix stuff, it's nice to have visibility in the organization. So create dashboards of how many vulnerabilities are open, time to fix, severities, bug bounty spend per team, and create that visibility, and then it's easier to push the people to do the changes. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you for very useful information, helpful tips. So if you are in a smallish, medium-sized company, maybe you're like A round, B round founded, and you're trying to justify to your executive leadership the budget for security for AppSec, what would you say from your experience are the high value points that you can use to sort of make an argument for the budget?
So when you're trying to convince your board, the first thing starts is show them the numbers. They understand the number language. Mm-hmm. Because when we want them to speak our language, we have to speak their language. Mm-hmm. So what we can do is we can show them the numbers by showcasing where things are right now. And there are so many wonderful open source tools that you can leverage to set up a pipeline. And there are already pipelines with open source tools. And they actually show you the number of bugs. There'll be false positives. There'll be false negatives. But you will have somewhere around 70 to 80% good results, which you can show it to them. And then actually ask for the budget. And when they give you the budget, it has to be somewhere aligned with you. That where exactly, because it should not be like they've given you the budget, but you can't buy anything. So it has to be in terms that which tool suits the best. These are the things that you have already done. This is the tool you need, and this is the closest one. I think you have to be very clear with that. And what I have seen that some people get scared when they have to talk to leadership about it. If you've done your homework right, if you've done these things right, you can actually contest for it. That yes, this is what we need, or nobody can blame you for what's going wrong. So I would say go with the numbers. Show them that these are the bugs that we have seen. These are the bugs that we have fixed. These are the bugs that we need to figure out whether they exist or not. But we need some tools, some tooling for it. And especially for the organizations which are startups or unicorns, it's important that they have some budget, but at the same time, these open source tools helps them.
Thank you.
I just have one very small thing to add. When you're purchasing a scanning tool, like, and you get to the point, you have your budget, you're POCing different types of tools. Every tool is going to be different for every company, depending on your source code managers, depending on what languages you're writing. So be cognizant about that. But one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is not having your developers use the tool before you buy it. So if you're application security and you go out and you're like, okay, I'm going to use whatever that software composition analysis tool is, or that static application security testing, or RASP, or IaaS, or whatever you're using, if you procure that tool and your developers are not part of that conversation, like you don't at least have 5-10 developers doing a POC with you, actually testing it, because what happens is they'll tell you if they like it or not. And if they don't like it before you even buy it, you probably shouldn't go with that vendor, because you're going to have a very hard battle uphill trying to convince them to actually use the tool.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Hey, so you guys talked a lot about the automation of bug bounty and stuff like that. Do you guys have some input on adding agility to threat modeling or design exercises?
Yeah, so we use a framework called agile threat modeling, which is basically a very simple exercise. I think it takes maybe 1.5 hours. And that's a very useful exercise that a team can do on their own time. Did that answer your question?
Like, so one thing to talk about threat modeling, if your teams voluntarily want to do it, like let's say you're working on version 2 of your product, that's a really good time to start. But if they don't want to do it, you're going to have a really hard challenge getting them there. Now, the other thing that's important about threat modeling, it's very time consuming. It requires a lot of stakeholders at your company. And really, in order to get to a point of like good maturity with threat models and they're actually helpful and useful, you better have like an army. It's a very mature thing. Like if you're looking at CMMI, you're like a 4 or 5. You're already optimizing at that point to be able to do threat modeling, with a couple exceptions. So like I said, if you're going to do a big release on version 2 of your product, it's good to think about, do something light scale, 30 minutes, get your developers in there, start away, and like hash it out with the right stakeholders. But the reality is that doing threat modeling at scale across a company, let's say you have 100, 200 developers, it's going to be really hard to do that constantly. In my opinion, I find that to be something that you would do much later down the line. As soon as you mature, you already knock out visibility, you already have remediation happening, you're tracking your program, you have good metrics, you're reporting on it, you have good budget buy-in, and then from there, you're able to start doing threat modeling at scale, in my opinion.
I would agree with them, but I would still say that there's one thing which you can refer if you're looking for resources. There's a beautiful manifesto which has been created for threat modeling manifesto by Adam Shostak, Jim Menico, and so many other people. I would say just take a look at that. At least you would, even if you would not be able to replicate, you can pick up some pointers out of it and build your own. Mm-hmm. Like it's like a checklist, and build your own checklist from that. Mm-hmm. So that's how it, if you want to take a look at it.
We got one more over here.
Yeah.
Sorry. So my 2 cents on that is actually I see a threat model as one of the most important things to do. Okay. On the other side, it's probably one of the most expensive things to do. You need the R&D attention. It requires time. It's a lot of human effort. Blah 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 blah. But the thing is that to gain agility when it comes to threat model, I think that the best way to do it is not to bring another tool that will help you. At the end of the day, you need to communicate with the developers. You need to come ready to those conversations with the technical information, the mapping of the applications, like come as ready as you can. But the agility will come by focusing on the right places to do the threat model. For example, if you have core teams in the R&D, if you have framework teams in the R&D, teams that you know that if you will cover them, probably they touch the entire R&D groups. Do the threat model there and you will achieve the most. So everything should be prioritized. If you will have no limitation in the budget and you have a single AppSec on a single developer, yeah, do threat model on anything. On the other side, you need to manage your resources and do the prioritization. So my take on this is find the crown jewels, not for the business, but for the R&D. The one risky places, the identity, the authorization, the authentication, the logging, all, if you think about threat model as like the stride model, pick each one of those letters, understand how you implement it within your organization, and focus on those places.
Thank you so much.
Hey folks, so something that you mentioned before was the interaction between the GRC teams and the application security teams. I've built GRC teams, I've built application security teams. The thing I have the most trouble with is how do you define where that point is where a vulnerability crosses the line and becomes something that you have to report in risk registers or stuff like that. So can I ask you to talk a little bit about how you form that interaction between GRC and application security, what that handoff point looks like?
Yeah, it's a really loaded question. I'll repeat that for those that weren't able to hear it exactly. Where and how do you is the bridge or the line between GRC and AppSec, and then how do you bridge it together, right? So for me, I think where at least I get involved in the conversations, for example, if we're going through a security questionnaire and it has an application security line item that isn't just like a templated answer, for example, that's when I'll come into the play. The reality is, like, your GRC manager and your AppSec manager should be communicating every single day. And if they're not, then like you need to incentivize them to start communicating more. If you're doing RFIs with customers, or you're doing or answering like any security questionnaire, like if AppSec needs to be involved, bring them in. It's better to have them than not have them. That extra 10 minutes might save you a lot during, like, down the line. I know for me personally, I'm sure many of other people in this room, like after Log4j, for example, it became a GRC AppSec privacy nightmare because I had hundreds of customers send in very specific requests. Were you affected by Log4j? How are you affected? What system did you use? Right? So we built out like a very long document that had a lot of these templated answers. So in the future now, and a playbook, right? So that was like a post-mortem from Log4j, was how do you actually handle these requests in the future? They need to get signed off by legal. They need to get signed off by marketing in some cases. You have to go through each of your departments. So making sure that your templated responses are scaled, and then that's sufficient. But if you ever have to think about where does the line start, that's probably already a problem, and you should get those people communicating like on a regular basis. My point of view.
Yeah. When you talked about line, my perspective is whenever you think that yes, this is the right time, this is the time, and I need to start, that's where the line starts. There's no early or there is no late. You have to start somewhere. And it's a journey which you have to take care. It is not like a destination where you, oh, I have attained everything. No. So you have to build step-by-step processes. Understand where all things are needed from the leadership perspective, from the people who are working on ground, be it development team, be it project managers, be it architects, be it security team. It is not just about security team or developers. It's about all of the people in sync. And that's when you actually get the right piece of the puzzle, and you would be able to get the ball rolling.
Hope that helps answer. Thank you.
It does,
Yeah.
thank you.
Hey everybody, great panel. So one of the continuous sources of frustration that I have in application security is this view that we have with developers where we kind of see them as cattle in a way, where it's like, we had someone not 15 minutes ago asking, how can we basically devise a gun whereby we cut developers' pay when they create like security bugs in their applications? That's absurd. Our goal should not be to send developers to the glue factory for making mistakes. It's completely ridiculous. And we have the tools and the automation to create really excellent workflows for devs, to the point where we can do things like, say, automated pull request generation, based on scanning results. So it's like, how can we bridge this divide, right? Where we're not basically in a middle school lunchroom where AppSec's on one side, developers on the other side, and we're not really communicating effectively and like actually supporting their workflows.
Yeah, so in my company, we really don't have this divide because we celebrate bugs basically. So we are allowed to do bugs, and when you are allowed to do bugs, it's not very dangerous to be the owner of a security vulnerability. So we just try to drive this from the transparency and celebrate bugs, and also that also helps with helping other teams understanding the bugs. Yeah, so I think it's just good to share information about vulnerabilities in the organization to, make people understand. So yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Celebrate bugs. Yeah.
So one of the things that I've built, and I did this at my prior employer, current employer, it's phenomenal. do a monthly application security forum, get all your senior leadership, one person per team, bring them into the same room, talk about what was the last 30 days, what have you done, what are you working on now, what did the next 30 days look like, what are your long-term goals, like the strategy and the timeline that you have, communicate it openly with all of them and make sure that all the engineering leadership is well aware of what you're working on. And what happens is, over time, you'll see the culture start to change. And so what I did first is I just said, anyone that's a senior vice president, you're going to start any of their direct reports, you need to be in this meeting. And then over time, what ended up happening is that once you start communicating a lot with them, like if you're using Slack or whatever your communication channel is, build an application security channel, post cool resources, like communicate as often and as frequently with all your development teams. Because as soon as you start giving them the strategies, they'll be able to weaponize themselves, right? And they'll be able to trust you more. And at the end of the day, also building rapport with them is a really great strategy. So ultimately, a monthly application security forum is an extremely effective way to hold everyone accountable, right? So if like your metrics are showing, hey, not great results, it's like, why? Maybe you can go talk to specific teams, specific leadership, and be able to consult with them and say, hey, like, what happened over the last, were you doing a major release and so you weren't able to remediate anything? Like, yeah, that's a high probability. Like, don't blame them. What you want to incentivize them is like, hey, maybe next month you can address a few more and hope for the best, right? And so a lot of it is like that constant communication and trust that you have with your developers, you'll start to become friends with them. It's the best approach.
Fantastic. Do you have anything?
Yes, thank you again. So my 2 cents on this is mainly trust. I really agree with Seth, but if we break down the trust, how we actually achieve the trust with the developers, so it's all about the common language. You need to gain the minimal technical level to be able to speak with developers. You cannot just say, oh, this is a sneak report, this is your bugs, go and fix them. You need to understand exactly what it means. You need to speak the same language. You need to bring them the technical fight that they need from the security side. But once it's done and you have the common language, and when you show them something, some gap, they understand that there is a gap. They take the ownership of this gap. Again, as I mentioned before on the code quality side, nobody wants to write a shitty code. Everybody writes shitty code, but on the other side, nobody wants to write shitty code. And once you write a shitty code, you want, okay, the blame is on me. I see you as a professional teach me what I did wrong. But you get this level of trust only, like, you need to build it. It's a relationship. Come with the right information, show them the right gaps, speak with them the same language, gain this trust. And once this trust is achieved, once you will come with the gap, they will give you their attention.
Very good. Thank you, guys. And remember to love your devs, y'all. They're your customers.
Yeah, we all love devs. We love you, devs. Yeah, devs, they are doing great. They bring innovation, they bring business, they bring us money, so why not? We all need them.
Good morning. So, okay. Oh my, is that what I sound like? Oh, I'm sorry. So I've just recently found myself as a product owner, and I found my team in quite a interesting situation, I guess, and it is. I understand at this point that things have been poorly managed in the past, and that's how we've got here. But the issue is that out of the different product teams, I am the owner for the smallest one possible that we have. It's fantastic. I love it. But we also have the longest backlog of things to do with the most work to do. Sucks. It's terrible. So, when we get our priorities released out to us from the chief engineer, rarely is security part of the conversation. It's not something that gets brought up. It's all these different capabilities that we want to build out, all these different features, yada, yada, yada. I'm sure you guys know the deal. But I very much want to be I want to help the security guys. It's something I understand is a huge deal. I want to be part of that conversation. I want to make sure that we are okay. How do I balance the long backlog we have with all the capabilities we need to build out with trying to get these different security fixes in such a short time span?
I would say Rome was not built in a day.
Bingo.
So it takes time. It takes time. When you have such a big backlog, it would never be done overnight. It'll take time, but you have to prioritize. And
Right.
It's not just about the backlogs, it's about any bug. that you have to prioritize. If there's a critical bug that comes into picture, you have to fix it as
Right,
early as
exactly.
possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so prioritization is one important thing, and you can't do it alone. You can't help security team. They have to help you, you have to help them. It's always a
Yeah,
two-way
that's-
street. Absolutely, it's a
We're not
two-way
getting that.
street. If you keep doing it, nothing is going to work out. Because
Right.
I've been on both the fences, and I know that these roads have to cross each way. Because if I say, oh, I'm helping security, they're not helping me. Trust me, you can't do anything. Whatever you're doing, it's going to go waste. So best is start asking for help. Tell them, let's sit down, have a round table, have those discussions, brown bags. An hour a week, I think that's sufficeable. They can spend an hour a week. If it's not, it has to go to the leadership. It has to come from the leadership. If it doesn't happen, nothing can fix security. Trust me. It is as good as not doing anything. So best is, let's have roundtable, let's have discussions, let's get them on the table that, okay, this is where I can reach, this is where you have to come. So we have to come midway. And how soon we can fix them. What are the things that I need to prioritize? You might not know what to prioritize at every step. They have to help you, guide you in that. So it's like a win-win situation for you both. Maybe it's a 1 month plan, maybe it's a 2 months plan, you never know. But prioritization will for sure help.
Yeah, so a couple things to add here. I'll give you a couple things to do, right? Ask yourself, is this a crown jewel? If the application is a crown jewel, check, you should probably deal with it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is it externally facing? That's a lot of risk. So you need to understand, like, is it internal, external? Because that's going to help you prioritize.
Yeah.
What data is in there? Is it sensitive data? Is it material non-public? Is it confidential? Know what type of data that this application is actually serving and who it's serving it to. Who's the audience? Because, for example, if you're feeding it through an API and you're whitelisting it to only one IP address, like that's a lot easier to deal with, for example, than something that's open to the world, right? Number 4, how much money does it make for your company? Is it your top generating revenue service? If not, you might want to deprioritize it a little bit. And then to cultivate this, and the way to bring about the change is doing bug bounty and pen tests. So if you're having difficulty convincing why security is important, break the app. Show them how bad it is, right? And if you can't, and you don't have the team to do it internally, for example, like let's say you're a small company, you only have one engineer, you're like, okay, I don't have pen testing talent. Like set up a pen testing program, go to an external vendor, like small scale pen tests for a particular service, particular application. They're not too costly with smaller vendors. And that's a great way to go to your team and say, look, okay, I need security now. Like our app is terrible. And if you don't know who to ask or what to ask, go to your CISO, go to your head of information security and ask them for resources at the bare minimum to better educate yourself as a product owner, because that's a great way to start.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah. So we talked a lot about responsibility and like, of course that the developers are responsible for the bug, but we cannot forget that there is some responsibility on the security side as well.
Right.
So prioritization, super nice, super smart, super wise. The developers shouldn't care about prioritization. The backlog will always be endless. Same as you have backlog for technical and R&D tasks that you need to perform that will keep you in the company for years. Probably any change here will increase the backlog on the security side. This is how it works.
Yeah.
The prioritization, like the end goal is not to decrease the number to 0. It won't be the case. Like you won't get to this stage, never. The thing should be that you should understand what are the more risky things, and again, as Seth mentioned and all the friends mentioned, how you actually do the prioritization, but for you or for the developer or the R&D groups, they don't need to do the prioritization. They should get a prioritized list. They need to understand each one of them, and they should be aligned with how the prioritization is done. But the prioritization, this is the security responsibility. Tell me what I need to do. I'll prioritize it compared to the business prioritization, to the R&D prioritization. I'll put it like same as I prioritize features in the R&D, same as I prioritize backend, front-end, DevOps. That should be part of the entire picture. But don't forget that the security team, they have job to do, okay? So they not get the noise, this is endless list, go over it. And
one more thing that I'll add is like, it's okay to have security items on your backlog. Just make sure it's documented somewhere and that you have buy-in from your leadership saying, I accept this risk. Whether it's the product owner themselves, whether it's the engineering teams, they need to be aware that the risk exists, so it needs to be documented. And then there needs to be some stakeholder needs to put their pen on paper and say, okay, I know that this is a medium security vulnerability, it's in the backlog, I'm gonna accept this risk for now and move on. You're not gonna be able to address everything, there's too much.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Any more
it.
questions?